We're bringing you boots on the ground insight from the ranchers, conservationists, and partners who are helping to preserve the best of the Golden State for generations to come. Join the California Rangeland Trust for inspiring stories of resilience, innovation, and hope as we get tuned into the land.
Welcome back to Tune Into the Land. I am your host, Michael Delbar, CEO of the California Rangeland Trust. Some of my favorite episodes are the ones where I get to sit down with a landowner partner, someone who can speak firsthand to what it means to ranch this land and carry a family legacy forward. Today, it's one of those episodes. I'm joined by Stan Van Vleck of Vleck Ranches, a multi-generational operation that has grown and evolved right alongside California itself. With 170 years of agricultural history behind it, the ranch is a testament to what's possible when family heritage meets a willingness to adapt. Stan's path back to the ranch wasn't a straight one. He grew up on the land, built a career in law, and eventually returned to take on the responsibility of managing and growing the family operation. His story mirrors what so many ranching families are navigating today, that push and pull between honoring tradition, surviving economic pressure, and securing the land's long-term future. In our conversation, we dig into the history of the Vleck Ranches, how their cattle operation has evolved over the decades, and the ways the ranch has diversified to stay viable in an ever-changing landscape. We also get into conservation and how easements, habitat stewardship, and strategic partnerships are helping keep the land intact for generations to come. And we go beyond the day-to-day ranch management. Stan offers a candid and very personal look at the realities of running a family business, the hard lessons, the proud moments, and what he hopes other ranchers can take away from his family's experience. So with that, I'm excited to bring you my conversation with Stan Van Vleck. So with that, it's my honor and pleasure to welcome Stan Van Vleck to the podcast. Stan, good afternoon.
Hey, Michael, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we're glad you took some time out of your schedule to chat with us. So tell us, Stan, about your personal journey. Tell us about how growing up on the Vleck Ranch was and where you went from there.
Sure. I loved growing up on the ranch. It definitely carved who I am today. And, the good and the bad in terms of how we all deal with agriculture, the back surgeries and the knee surgeries and everything else, through hauling hay and doing the things and getting run over by horses and cattle and stuff. But the good parts is of really dealing with the ethics of how we approach life, the importance of taking care of your neighbor, the importance of taking care of animals, taking care of people. It's responsibility. Agriculture teaches us responsibility. And I was kind of a hellion when I was growing up. I was the youngest of four kids. I wanted to be my own spirit. And I'd been suspended 8 times by the time I got into the 9th grade. And so my parents were really good friends with the principal, and basically because they got almost a weekly call. And so I was problematic early on. But I love being able to work on the ranch. And for me, and then especially when I got into FFA helped to channel my problem of just causing trouble, and it got me into not only showing animals but into FFA of Parley Pro. And for me, that was just great because I love that challenge of being able to do that. And that helped me to be able to really focus on something that I was passionate about in addition to just regular agriculture and livestock. And really that set me on an important course because it gave me a different option than just working cattle. And I was still passionate about that. And when I was a junior in high school, I talked to my dad. I said, I want to go to either UC Davis, Cal Poly, or Stanford. And, my grades were so, for Stanford. I mean, it was a reach, but I still wanted to do that. And then for me, I still remember that night because it was a stark reality for me. My dad said, well, good luck. I hope it all goes well for you. Stanford's really expensive, so I don't know how you're going to pay for that. And my thoughts were, wait a minute, I know you paid for the oldest generation. And my dad said, yeah, I've been clear about that, though. Firstborn is the one to be able to stay. Our operation's not large enough for more than one family. That's the way I benefited as himself. He benefited, and that doesn't seem fair to him to change the rules after he benefited. And so he said, so you're on your own. And so he said, as it relates to college, you're not coming back here. So, because I talked to him about I wanted to study agriculture and come back. And he said, well, you're not coming back here. I've made that clear. He hadn't, but I got the point that night. And he said, because you're not coming back here, it doesn't make sense for us to invest in you and pay for your college. So he said, that just doesn't make sense. So
tough love.
Yeah. So I as a, 17-year-old, I responded maturely, and I think I said, F you, that's not right. And I was hurt and I was crying. I was mad because, you just feel like you're rejected, and there's a whole lot of things that go on in the mind. And again, mind of a young 17-year-old, especially a male that didn't have a lot of frontal lobe development at that time. I was pissed. I was hurt. Just because it was part of rejection and everything else. It wasn't just paying for college. It wasn't the dollars. It was that. And I remember that night set the direction of where I was going, because I remember telling my dad, at the end of that discussion, we're still yelling at each other. Then if I can't have this operation, if I can't be part of it, I'm going to go to law school and I'm going to earn enough money. I'm going to come back and buy this place. And my dad kind of looked at me like, you're full of shit. And also, that's not going to happen because that's not my wish. I'm your father. You do what you respect your father's wishes, and, that's not the way it's going to be. So, I didn't get into Stanford, did get into Cal Poly, did get into UC Davis, went to Cal Poly, loved Cal Poly, thought it was phenomenal. I was an ag business major and had a minor in chemistry. I loved that. And, I worked my way through school. I roofed. I went to work at 5 a.m, finished at 2 p.m, then went to classes. Because I was going to make money. I figured I'm going to make money. I'm going to start buying property and fixing it up, rentals and things, residential property. And I'm going to start saving money to be able to buy the ranch. I said, I'm going to pay for school, but I'm going to do that. So I also waited tables on the weekend. So actually I made money while I was in school. I would usually miss the first 2-3 weeks of school because I was working. The roofing company I was working on was union. So I made good money. So I made a lot more money than I needed for school. And so I loved that aspect because I was starting to make money and starting to invest in real estate. So it worked out well. And then the third year, I started really getting involved in student government. I was on the advisory board for the College of Ag and such, and then ran for vice president of Cal Poly because I was told that the student body owns a lot of assets. They owned at that time about 12 million assets and $4 million annual budget. So I'm like, that's phenomenal. But what was really important is they paid $7,000. And this is when tuition was about $800 for the year. They paid $7,000 for the year if you were in that job because it was viewed as a job. And I'm like, so that means I don't have to roof and wait tables and I can run a company. That's 250 employees, 400 total, 250 full-time, 150 part-time. And I can learn how to run a company. Oh, I'm in. So, it wasn't like I wanted to be elected, but it was like I wanted to run a company and I wanted to make $7,500. And so, that allowed me to be able to do that. And I was fortunate that I won the election. And that was as a junior. And then, again, through FFA, I had Parley Pro. So Parley Pro really set me up because I was chair of the Senate. And so the year before that, and Parley Pro gave me the experience to be able to how to run a meeting. We've all been gifted with that ability. If you've been part of FFA, they teach you a lot. And so when I ran for vice president, there are 30 senators. I got all 30's endorsements. I got the previous president's endorsement, the vice president. And, it worked out really well where I got elected and it worked, it went well. And then the person who was elected president that year actually kind of got it by a fluke because the person who was expected to win had an issue that came up about a week before the election. And so this guy was an engineer, never been elected, never anything else. So when I got elected and he got elected at the same time, he said to me, I have no idea how to run this. I've never been involved in an ASI or anything else in student government. Do you mind doing most of the stuff and helping me? And I said, sure. So I was running a lot of the president stuff and everything else. And so a year later, when it came time to run for president, because you got $8,000 that year if you're president, I'm thinking, that's great. I can again help run a company. I can learn, and I don't have to roof and wait tables. This is a great opportunity. So, and again, I loved it because again, as a 20-year-old and then 21 and 22-year-old in government, if you're running a company that has 12 million in assets and 4 million annual budget and 400 employees, we had real problems. I mean, we had good issues, we had bad issues, we had all the things you have to do. We had construction we were going on, there was litigation on issues, all those things that you're exposed to. Wow. As a young person. It really helped me to understand that I love business and I really love, challenges and the opportunities there. So for me, I thought it was great and, I really enjoyed it. And then my senior year, I still wanted to come back to the ranch, and I was fortunate enough at the end of my career at Cal Poly, they have they select the top student out of the College of Agriculture. And I was, it must have been a weak year that year because I was selected, and I called Dad and said, Dad, I've graduated number 1 out of Cal Poly and for agriculture. And I said, will you take me now to be on the ranch? And Dad said, I've been very clear. The answer is no. And I said, again, pissed off, then I'm going to law school and I'm coming back to take this place. I was just, I had now 5 years of my career because I had a minor as well in chemistry, as I mentioned. So I, spent 5-year career at Cal Poly. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be part of that ranching operation, part because of emotions and to prove my father I could, being very candid, maybe even more than wanting the ranch to be able to go run it and do the things. I wanted to prove my father was wrong. That really cast in stone then that I'm going to law school. And so I went to law school. I went to McGeorge. I got into both Davis and McGeorge. I worked for a really good ag firm, and George Soares was my mentor, and we represented a lot of agriculture. So I went into the interview for a clerk position when I was still in law school. I was just getting ready to start law school. It was the summertime, right before classes started. And I interviewed with George and one of the other senior partners. And when they saw that I had a minor in chemistry on my resume, the other partner said, wait a minute, chemistry, how did you put ag business and chemistry together? And I said, well, I love chemistry. So I took so many classes, I finally got, what's equivalent to a minor in chemistry. Until I got to a point where I just didn't have enough mathematics to take the classes at a 400 level. And he said, no shit. And I go, yeah, I love chemistry. And he goes, we have a lot of companies who we represent who are chemical companies and agriculture and other areas. And I have no idea what they're talking about. And he said, you're hired. And it was funny because, again, just dumb luck. Again, I love chemistry and and here I was going in thinking about my legal career and all the other stuff. And, the ag background, because again, it's a firm that had a lot of ag. What got it was the chemistry stuff. What a kick. So again, in life, you never know when things are going to come at you. And then I got lucky because a fraternity brother, I was in AGR, and AGR was great for me through Cal Poly. I learned a lot. There was an AGR who was there. So I'm there 1 week, and he says, hey, heads up, I'm leaving. I'm going to go start my own firm, and I'm going to recommend, because I think you could do a really good job. I'm actually going to recommend, and he was an attorney. He said, I'm going to recommend you take my job. And I don't think they need to go hire an attorney. I actually think even though you're just going into law school, they can have another attorney who reviews your work and everything. I think they can hire you, and you could do lobbying in the Capitol because they did a lot of lobbying and regulatory work. So at 23, and the firm actually accepted the recommendation of this attorney who was leaving. So they hired me. So the only problem was I had to work full time. And I was like, well, I want to go to law school full time. So I chose to go to work full time and law school full time, which is not good. You actually sign a contract when you're going to law school. You're not going to do that because you're not going to learn a lot, or at least not learn as much as you can. And, but I needed money. I was putting my way through. So here's a great and it was a great opportunity for me because at 23 years old, I'm lobbying at the Capitol representing agricultural chemical companies and ag chemical companies as well as production agriculture. And for me, it was a tremendous opportunity because that's one thing that I did love doing. So I took the job, and I would just go into work early in the morning. And, and then I would come in really early. So that way I'd be able to get an 8-hour day in by about 3 in the afternoon, 4. And then I would head and go do all my classes till about 10 or 11 at night. So I did that for 3 years straight, no break. So I, didn't go to a bar, didn't go to take a date, didn't do, any of those things just for 3 years. I joked, I served prison. I did time, but I did, law school full time and working full time. And at the end of the 3 years, I was done and started working for a law firm, did really well. In the meantime, still worked on the family business, intentionally did not take, my dad would offer to pay me. And I said, no, I was too pissed, but I'm here and I'll work. And I like to work, but I just, I don't want your money. Again, I was hurt, I was mad. And so I'm working in the law firm. Things are going well. And then, I started, my dad and I, even though we had a relationship, we couldn't talk business. We talked almost every day. We just couldn't talk about the family business, but we talked politics. We talked what was happening in the news. We talked about, family. We talked about everything else, just could not talk business. And, it got where things are going well in the legal career. I'm doing, I'm fortunate enough. I've got really good experience, and I've had some good opportunities, and I'm rising in the legal world and financially getting paid really well. So it's an opportunity where I started, I wanted to buy the family business and had the ability after a while. And my dad's telling me, no, don't do that. You can't do that. That's not my wish. And so without getting into a lot of details, because with family, there's a lot of good and bad that happens when you have, family businesses and things that go well. At the end, my father unfortunately was killed in an accident, and it was a threshold decision for our family. A good number of people just wanted to sell the business and just wanted to move on. Again, cow-calf operation. If you look at the return on investment versus the capital, it didn't make sense from that aspect. If you just look at that versus some of us in the family, at least a minority of us in the family, wanted to be able to keep the business. So I moved forward and bought the family out, and we had 7 family members. I started with 4% of the business, bought out the 96% that was represented, and went in debt. And this was unfortunately in 2008. So when my father was killed in 2000, so I'm running the business till then, and I'm trying to figure out how the hell can we make money? I mean, it's the cattle business. I'm trying to figure out how can I just make enough money, not only to survive as in the cattle business, but to buy out all the capital. And it just wasn't working. So, fortunately in my legal career, I was able to sustain some, but when it came time to buy out, I went to banks and I'm going to everybody going, how can we afford to do this? And the cash flow is just not there, which, a lot of cattlemen and cattle women face, when there's a transition to the next generation. If there's a requirement for a buyout, or one sibling buying out another sibling, their partner buying out the other, the operation rarely will make that work. So, for me, that also was a critical point for me, a learning point, not only, seeing that struggle, but trying to figure out, okay, this isn't good from a business standpoint, that if the business can't afford to be bought out by, the next generation can't, because it doesn't make enough money, that's really telling you that I needed to, because if I buy this business, I'm in charge on this stuff, but it's incumbent upon me to try to find a way so the business is economically strong enough where it can be sustainable over time, and it can make each time we come to a new generation and a transition to the next generation of assets, whether it's bequest or whether it's by sale, it's got to figure out a way where it makes more money. I mean, it can't just be a trophy property or something that just sits there. It's got to be something that economically is sustainable. And that sustainability also you have to make sure you educate the next generation on how the operation worked, what happened. Because I saw that as well. That didn't happen in our generation. It was kind of like, dad's passed and crap, we got to go through the documents and figure out who's buying our cattle, where our sales coming from, what are we doing? And, go through his diaries to figure out how things worked. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a smooth baton passing. And so that had to change as well for success. So, desperately trying to figure out how to pay things off. And most of it actually was debt back to family members. And it was set up where if I wasn't able to pay debt, then my shares and everything went back. So it's one of those, even though, for example, we paid 50% off, if you can't pay the rest of the 50%, everything goes back to the family, the other family members. So, I mean, it was there was a benefit for them that if they stayed and I couldn't pay things off, it didn't work. So there's a certain amount of money and a certain amount of debt that we had to do. And so, for me, there was a lot of sleepless nights. And, this is again in 2008 when things went really down with the economy. And fortunately, and this segues into, California Rangeland Trust and conservation, we looked at all different ways to be able to make money. We have 9 square miles. At that time, we had 9 square miles of land, and now we're larger. But then, we're trying to figure out, okay, what can we do with this? Do we do camping on the ranch? Do we do large scale outdoor events? What do we do to make money? I mean, we already did some mining, we did other areas, but state of California was really ramping down on that, so that income stream was getting constricted. So for us, it was 4 years of moving the Rubik around, trying to figure out a way. I mean, we met every month, myself and my ranch manager and my Mark Burrell, who is as an advisor on businesses and does a phenomenal job. He's with Westmark and really trying to figure out how can we take the current assets that we have and make it productive enough where we can pay debt. Because if I can't pay off in the next couple of years, everything's gone. Yeah. And I made a decision, well, crap, I'm not giving it back. I'm going to sell it and at least pay off the debt that's not done. And then at least, it'll be sold, but I'll try to sell it to an ag family so everything goes right versus just giving the stock back. So it was sleepless nights up till about a little after 2012. Finally, I really started getting involved, and we did conservation easement. First was before we started with CRT, and that was not our choice. We did our first conservation easement of about 800 acres, and that was a saving grace that allowed us to pay for a lot of the debt that was still owed. So that got us almost flush. So the next question was, because we'd gone through 4 years of every month meeting, and we actually had a spreadsheet that had every field that we owned, every different activity, and we're trying to figure out how we can money. And we did that again for 48 meetings, 4 years again every month. And it finally, 4 years into this, and after we made the payoff, there was a light bulb that went on, and it was interesting because I kept looking through the lens of saying, what can we do as a cattle ranching operation? We're just not looking enough. And I kept struggling. What can we do in these meetings as we're going through it? And finally, because of desperation and our back was against the wall, the analysis changed. And for us, it changed really everything. And the analysis went to, instead of being a cattle ranching family business, we're just going to look at ourselves as a family business. That didn't mean that ranching wasn't our history and ranching isn't who we are, but maybe we should look beyond just ranching to see if there's another way we can do things. And that's when we started saying, okay, let's, instead of just using conservation easements to pay down debt, let's actually use them strategically to be able to diversify our operations. And for us, the great thing about desperation, when you're in a really crappy situation, it really helps you to, you're thinking about everything, because the survival instinct kicks in and it's like, holy crap, I got to, you think of everything and you put everything on the table. And when we put that on the table, it felt right. And again, because we all knew our history is ranching and we still want our future to be ranching. But for the first time ever to say, maybe it's not everything is a ranching. It's beyond that. And that changed everything, because then we said, wait a minute, what else can we do? And so we really started looking at what else could we do. And then we came up with commercial real estate to be able to help. So, and then also venture capitaling. So if we can take and do conservation easements, but do it in the form of mitigation, because mitigation, we get between 5 and 10 times the fee simple value of the land. which is much better than getting, with what you can in a conservation easement. Again, nothing against conservation easement. Sometimes that's all that's available. Fortunately for us, we're in a strategic location where there's development going on in the Sacramento region. And so we set ourselves up and saying, okay, we are going to strategically lean in conservation in form of mitigation, but really lean into conservation in terms of we want to be the best at how we protect the land, how we protect the land for our cattle, how do we protect it for our hay operation, and also how do we protect it for endangered species, and how do we just do the right thing for the environment. It really became equal to what are we going to do with cattle in terms of our viewpoint. Before it was always just, we got to do everything we can to make sure we make enough money with cows and how we do things. Now we said, you know what, we're going to lean into the conservation area. And for me, it was something where I said, I think we can be profitable and we can do things in an environmentally forward way. And again, I'm not saying other people should do that. I think it's a conscious decision and it's an individual decision. But for us, we said we're going to do this, and it has made our operation so dynamic because we've been able to enter into very helpful and lucrative mitigation easements. We've taken those monies. We've not taken any of those monies and pocketed it. We've taken in 1031 those monies. We're buying commercial real estate. Now we have a great commercial real estate portfolio. We're, fast forward, we've conserved over 3,500 acres with a goal of doing 4,500 acres. And again, that's with the ability to do it at 5 to 10 times fee simple value. And so I want to talk about this because if there are cattlemen and cattlewomen who are thinking about how can we make this work and how can we make our operation more dynamic, let's walk through the math. So on our cattle ranching operation, we're making 1% to 2% return on capital investment, right? So now let's assume we're just getting the 5%. Let's not even go to the 10%. So we're extracting the value through these conservation easements, again, mitigation, and we're getting 5 times that value. So now we're putting into commercial real estate. So whatever we had before, it's now worth 5 times more. So we take that cash, it's 5 times more, it's going to commercial real estate. And commercial real estate, we're averaging 6% return. So that 6% return times 5, again, we've got 5 times the value. You now have 30 times the value that we were obtaining back when we were doing cows only. So we didn't double our profits. We increased them by 30 times. That dynamically changed us. Plus, we had a situation where commercial real estate, we were in investment grade properties. They were stable, which was something that we're not used to and very many people in the cattle industry are used to. It's like, holy crap, our budget's going to be the same except for 5% more because we have built-in caps in our rental rates where we're going to be increasing, and people pay their rent and everything goes well. We're not having severe volatility. It's like, this is phenomenal. And so now actually when cattle ranching, which is not right now, the cow prices are lower, it gives us the ability to expand.
Right.
So for us, it actually complements our business. So, and then there was something that very important as well, that one thing that I saw that didn't work with our business, again, referencing back to what carved me when I was a 17-year-old, fair is not the right word. It just didn't seem appropriate to say, we don't have enough capital ability to be able to handle more than one family. So in essence, you have to choose which child gets that. That's a tough decision for any parent.
Well, I thought it's always when I first learned this from you, I thought it was very, very cool. Is when the family came over and settled in 1856.
Yes.
You still have the covered wagon when they made that trip, which
yes.
I think is so cool. But that ranch operation for all those generations, it was just, we're raising cattle. This is what it is. That's when your dad said, we can't afford to raise one family off of this. That experience of everything that you went through as a kid that shaped you, that has to have just been what turned you into the man you are today, and that acumen. Because that's what made you.
It's the good and the bad of what it carved me into. And I appreciate that because, there's, and we still have that wagon, still proud of that. And there's nothing like looking at that little buckboard that's 9 feet by 4 feet wide. And it's literally put together by bolts. And the reason why it's bolts is because they had to walk we came from Wisconsin. We originally in New York, and went back when it was agriculture. We came in the late 1600s, then moved to Wisconsin, and then stayed there for a couple hundred years again, and then time to move because California was opportunity. Imagine, and this wasn't lost on me, is when you see that wagon and you think that wagon carried provisions. It didn't carry people. People didn't sit in that wagon and go 4,000 miles. Or almost 4,000. They walked for spring through summer and hoping to heck they made it before fall and when snow started over the Rockies. And those wagons were disassembled as they were going over the Rockies and the steep areas, and they had to take horseback. And they would carry the provisions up by horseback, and they would take back and forth, disassemble the wagon, and they'd have pulleys, or they would take pulleys and they would pulley the wagon up. We still had some of the pulleys are wooden, where they would pulley the wagons up the Rockies, and they would go to the next tree, pulley it up, the next tree, pulling it up. And you're realizing what those people did. So no matter the day that I had on the ranch, when I'm digging post holes or it's 110 degrees and I'm digging post holes in hardpan, my hardest day is better than their easiest day of their life. Yeah. And that what people had to do. They did that. They had a good life in Wisconsin. They made that sacrifice to do all that, to start a new life, to leave their family. And three of our family members, young brothers, left with their wives. First, the brothers went year one, kind of established stuff, and then came back. And then year two brought their wives back and started because of opportunity. What's not seen a lot is that was done for the next generation and the next generation. And that, to your point, that carved me where I said, I don't want to have another generation have that obligation where you're trying to fit each generation into, you've got to come back and work cows. And economically, as we all know in the cattle industry, it's a hell of a lot to impose to say, you're going to do this because economically it's hard to make it work. So my goal was not only to keep the business intact, but to really change the business. And that's why that transition of all of a sudden realizing we're a family business, and that easements for us, mitigation easements and conservation easements, and CRT was great in helping us with UC Davis and others, and the federal government and state government in getting easements that we could get done, and we got funded. And then we transitioned those again into commercial real estate. And now we have logistics buildings, warehousing buildings, medical buildings, food service buildings. I mean, we have a great portfolio, and that portfolio funds anything we want to do with cattle. And it funds, beyond that. And we also have a third company, and this goes again to making sure that we keep going, is we have a venture capital firm. So we invest in, what we think is a good return, but also diversity from our business. A lot of what we're invested in right now is in medical technology. There are significant changes with what's happening with AI and medical technology, and we're invested in that. But what leveraged us in to be able to do that were conservation and mitigation easements. And so we've taken that. And now what you have, again, looking at the next generation and hopefully 5-10 generations hereafter, because we want to hit 250 and well beyond that. We now have a company that I'm proud to say, the company that my father had. And part of this, again, is my hurtfulness and ego and everything else. When I first took over the company, and I told my wife, Nicole, who I love dearly and who's very pragmatic, I would not be happy until I made 100 times more of what my father made. And that was just a number that I picked. It's arbitrary, but even though he was in the ground, and again, I love my father and he'd passed, I still had to do that in order to feel self-worth. I'm happy 2025 we hit that number, and it wasn't on sales of any, it wasn't on sales of property or anything else. It was normal taxable income. We hit 100 times more than that previous business. And what that's gained us the ability to do for the next generation is when they come into our operations, our business flexes. It's not just cattle. And again, I'm proud of cows, and I'm proud of our livestock operation now, also environmental, what we do for the environment. But now the next generation can be part of our business if they want to be involved in real estate or venture capital. Because venture capital, if their passion is education, if their passion is healthcare, if their passion is architecture, if it's technology, that venture capital firm can be used to help go down that path. So someone now can be part of our family business, even though their passion is not cows, but they're part of the family.
Right.
So what we've created is an economic opportunity business, but more importantly, it's a family opportunity business. And it's still going to be a family business. And to me, family's more important. And I'm sorry, it's more important than cows. It's more important than dirt. It's more important than structures.
Yeah.
And to be able to weave something where we can have our love of cows and we can have our love of family and have it where they're not mutually exclusive. And now that they're entwined, I'm happy.
Now, there's times I think in our family that the cows get more love than some of the rest of us do. But I think what you've done, though, Stan, is you've taken that passion and that strong desire for the family to do today what your ancestors did, and that grit and that determination to make it better for the next generation. You've done that. And
I've done part because, again, they did a hell of a lot more than I ever could have. They risked their life.
Well, that's very honorable of you to say, but you have done a hell of a lot too. And I watched how you took the ranch there in Sacramento County, and where there's a mitigation easement or there's a standard purchased easement, one or the other. You've been able to craft that ranch into different easements and maximizing the attributes of different pieces of it in a way that I've not seen anybody else do. And I've used you as an example with other landowners. I said, well, I have some of these species, I have this and that. I said, well, here's something you should look at. And this has worked out very well for others. Take a look at this. And I think your approach to that has been phenomenal.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, a lot of people have been part of this team and a lot of stuff. And so, I'm a small factor in this process. But I'm glad we're having this discussion and you raised this before we even said, about this podcast, because I want to help our industry. Because one of the things that I love about the cattle industry is some say we compete against each other because we're all in this. No, we're all in this side by side with each other.
Right.
We may jokingly look over to make sure what our neighbor's doing and everything else in a competitive way. But whatever our neighbor needs, we're there to help. And I know whatever our neighbor needs or whatever we need something, our neighbor's there helping. And our neighbors, and in terms of the cattle industry, our neighbor goes from border to border, in California in terms of what we do. We are all in this together. And if there's something that we can do to impart to help other people and to use as an example, and again, trust me, with our family and the crap that my generation did, we've got a whole hell of a lot of things we can show you not to do on how to screw up a family business and a lot of things, myself included, that have fingerprints on mistakes. But if we do have some things that are good, we want to help. And that segues to, the future of also what we're trying to do. As I mentioned earlier on, we have really leaned into the environment. We work well with, for example, working with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. We have Fish and Wildlife come on our place, usually every quarter, and we're teaming up with them, trying to figure out how we could promote more species, even more endangered species, and we don't make any more money for that. A lot of this is on land that's already in conservation easement, and they were asking us, well, why? For the first 4 or 5 years, we've been doing this now almost 10 years.
help us understand, why are we coming on to do this? What's the ultimate gain? We appreciate you doing it, because usually people meet us with a shotgun, versus saying, no, come on our place and we want to learn more. And I said, well, we want to be, if we're in, we want to be the best. And we're not competing against our neighbors or anything else. We're just to ourselves. We just want to do the best job we can. And so, we want to team up with you, because you have biologists, you have others, you see a lot of other ranches that we don't see. What can we do to make our place better? And what can we do to make for the species? Let's experiment. Let's try. I mean, obviously, commercially, we're still an ag, a farming operation, and a livestock operation. But if we can help, we want to do that. Well, we now have a great relationship with Fish and Wildlife, and it's been helpful for both sides, I think, because we've been able to talk and impart to them things that for easements and others that are in the documents that make it hard for cattlemen to do what they want to do, that things were modified and those documents maybe took a little different approach. It could actually help, and more cattlemen would be a part of it, and they would actually do a better job because it gives them flexibility to do what they do best. Probably that land has been in cows for 100 years, wherever you're looking at an easement. And when a document says, go in and change how things are done because we want to protect this great environment that's there, well, it's like, well, yeah, think about it. The great environment's there is because cows been on for 100 years.
Right. Let
them do what they do well. And so now that we've had that trust, we've had good conversations like that. And, it makes sense. And again, so I applaud, Wade Crowfoot and others who've done stuff and at people at Fish and Wildlife who we worked with directly that have really been good. I mean, Dylan Wood at Fish and Game for our region and Sacramento region has been phenomenal. He has been very practical. He still follows the rules, still does that, but he finds a way to be able to make sure, cattle ranching continues and also the environment's protected. That's phenomenal. And so, we have now moved to a new level, and we're hoping that this is something that we can provide more options for cattlemen and cattlewomen on their operations. We've been able to develop that you can take green material that's being used by municipalities, you can transition that to compost, and then you can apply that to rangelands, and you can increase the quality of your soil by 20 to 30%. So that means you can have higher by 20 to 30%, animal units on your operation. So that means, and again, that's with little impact to overhead. So there's some impact to direct cost, but the impact is small. So you can actually double your profits because you don't have the cost yet. You can put on 20 to 30% more animals. Well, that can double the profit on your operation depending upon how your numbers work. And again, there's opportunities out here. And we've been working with municipalities in our region, and we take green waste from over 1 million people, convert it into to compost, and we are paid to receive it. We are paid to convert it into compost, and then they pay to apply it to our land. And then we receive the financial benefit of having 20 to 30% more grass on our land. And we'll be the first in the world. We've applied for and done research and put money into technology. Again, part of our business is environmental technology. And we've developed a way to be able to sequester carbon. So imagine that instead of cattle ranching creating greenhouse gases, which again, I think most of us realize, and the podcast that we've heard that CRT and Michael, you've done in the past, have realized a lot of that stuff is BS. The numbers aren't nearly as high as people think. I remember that podcast. That kicked ass. And I appreciate our professor at UC Davis who rolled that out and has been able to do that, did a hell of a job. But notwithstanding that, we still have to push back as an industry on that. Well, here's an opportunity where we can offset greenhouse gases. So all of a sudden, cattle ranching is sequestering greenhouse gases. But when you activate your soils with compost, it does significant amount. We are sequestering, and we will over the 40-year cycle. You do these in 40-year cycles, which are great for people who have easements because you're not going to sell it for development anyway. This gives you another tool, especially if you're in easements, because you apply this compost for over a 40-year period. And in our operation, we're going to be sequestering hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon. We had to apply, and we applied through the world's largest clearinghouse for this to be able to get credits. It takes about 3 years. But if we're accredited, then we will have the patent on that. And we want to be able to share that with other cattle ranchers in the state. Because to give you an idea, these credits go from $30 to $50 and sometimes higher per credit. And again, we're sequestering hundreds of thousands of tons of those. So you put 20 to 30, that's money in addition to the increased amount of beef that you're going to be able to do by increasing the soil productivity and your grass. Now you're sequestering carbon. So for us, we are leaning in, trying to do all things that we can to improve the environment, to make great beef. I mean, we're happy. One of the things, the operation that we started that I bought, we were just 200 cows. Now we're at 2,000. We were generic cattle. That was pretty low quality. I mean, Dwayne Martin Sr., who I love dearly, when I saw that he was one of our buyers, and I called after my father passed, because again, we had no list. I'm looking through the diaries. I called Dwayne Martin Sr. and say, Dwayne, would like to have you buy our cows. And he said, with all due respect, you guys have been leaning on your reputation for about 10, 15 years. Your cows aren't good. And, my jaw kind of hit the ground, and I'm like, okay. And I said, well, I'm trying to save the business, and I'm trying to do all we can. And I want to be able to, figure out how to do this right. And Dwayne Martin Sr., being Dwayne Martin Sr., who he is, he said, I'll help. He didn't have to help this young man who's trying to figure out how to do this. He said, let's go to lunch. Let's have a conversation about it. So we go to lunch, and he tells me all the problems that we have with our cows and why we lack uniformity, we lack quality, we lack the right genetics, we lack. And then again, Dwayne Sr., he's very direct. But gotta love Dwayne Sr., and I mean that emotionally, because he's one of the reasons why we're still in the cattle business. He then said, but I believe that you will be able to do this, and I'll help you. So he started helping us buy the right cows. He started helping us figure this stuff out. And then when we brought Jerry Spencer, who's extremely knowledgeable in cattle and great for our farm ranching manager, and this year will be 25 years on our operation, what Dwayne was helping us to direct, and he'd be buying cattle for us and helping us build a great herd. We're now at 2,000 head, and I'm proud to say we partnered with Senior and now Junior, and they are dear friends, and will never be the high quality of cattle ranching operation they are. We'll always be striving to be in their shadow, but even being in their shadow means you kick ass, because they are top notch. And so, again, back to our point. Now, we can help in another way for the cattle industry, just like Dwayne Sr. did for us. We have the ability to help people, hopefully, by finding new ways to be able to add value to their business, so they're not looking to year to year going, can we survive? They can actually be investing, and they can strategically be in the cattle industry, whether it's diversifying their operation or whether it's putting compost on your operations, doing these different things. But it's figuring out ways to be able to diversify cattle operations, diversify in terms of your practices. We have nothing in common with what the ranch I bought now 25 years ago. But what we do have is the spirit of, we want to make money, we want to make great beef, and we want to be here for generations. And so we want to keep that going, and we want to help others in doing that. We are not in competition with you. We are your neighbor. And if there's a way we can help, we want to do that, whether it's helping to figure out on easements how to do what we've done, or helping to relay the mistakes that we've made, so you can learn by our mistakes versus learning them directly. Our honor, our job, our duty is to help.
The carbon aspect of this, I know that you and I have had conversations about how to share that information with other landowners. And where do you see there's some challenges to that market. Some of the terrain in California ranches aren't conducive to compost applications, but are there other areas in which that market could be accessed.
The good news is when you take a look at what this law is, again, every municipality is supposed to comply with this in California. Before that law went into effect, there was about 1 million tons of green material that was available to make compost. Now there's 17 million tons. To give you an idea of just how much compost we put on our ranch, we're in the eastern Sacramento Valley in the foothills. You could line up just for 1 year of what we take semi trucks, and they would go end to end all the way to San Francisco. That's how many truckloads we take. And that's just with the 4 jurisdictions we've talked about. And there are 450 cities in California and 58 counties. Some have more green waste than others. So there's still, and we're taking, less than 1% of all that. So that means there's still a lot out there for others. So from a threshold issue, the first thing that's going to be is if we get approved for being able to use these for carbon credits. If we don't get them approved, first, let's go down that path. It still improves the quality of your land by 20 to 30%. And you're not having to buy, and this is important, you're not paying for the improvement to your soil. Sometimes you're being paid. The amount is not a lot what you're being paid. But again, you're being paid to improve your soil. And our soil is our factories. I mean, those are, all our jobs are converting soil, water, and sun into grass, and that grass into beef.
That returns on the back end.
Exactly. So if they can make our factories 20 to 30% better, and we get paid a little bit to do that, that's phenomenal. So and again, especially if we've already entered an easement, and there's not a lot else we could do with that property, except for, again, raise cows. That's what we've obliged ourselves to do. Well, now we can do it at a higher profitable rate. Now let's take in if we're also able to sequester carbon. So we're hoping to know within the next 6 to 8 months. And we've been told by Vera that there's good likelihood we're going to be approved because they've reviewed the science and the science looks good. Now we're going through the verification process because we have to be able to show them that as we're sequestering in year 1, year 5, year 40, we have to show them the testing protocols that we're doing in the soil, how we're going to be able to show them if greenhouse gases are coming back out of the soil, to show that we're actually keeping it inside the soil. There will be some percolation that comes out, but again, it's showing all that. We're now in that part of the science, which is in the last part of what we do. So if we're able to approve that, or if Vera's approving that for the use that we have, and that's being done with a company called Agriman. Agriman is the composting company. They're the ones that we teamed up with and have submitted the data in to Vera. If we get that approved, then we have a patent on that for the next few years. But again, we want to share that with other cattlemen. We want to be able to share this process. So if we get that approved, we're going to be reaching out, and we think CRT is a great organization to do that because your members are people who have easements. And this is a natural for people who have easements that we can, we'll strategically look where are they located as it relates to a municipality that is trying to get rid of green waste. And so if, strategically part of it is, where you're located. But again, there are 450 cities in this state, 58 counties. They have the obligation by law that they have to get rid of this material, and it can't just be disposing of it. It has to be put to a productive use. Well, this is a great productive use that requires very little capital intensiveness because we have the land. They don't have to build big processing facilities. They don't have to build a lot of other things, put a lot of money into. What they're putting in is creating this compost. So then it goes into farming and creates food and improves the environment.
So the conservation easements, from your perspective, have been a pretty good business strategy. With a
90% assurance, I can say that our business would not be here without that. So, first, it's saved us. And then not only has it saved us, it's taken a slingshot from where we were, on, I won't say a death knell, but damn close, where we were trying to figure out if we're going to survive, having those discussions for 4 years. How are we going to survive and having a tough time, to slingshotting us to where we're strategically deploying it. Again, we have a venture capital company, commercial real estate, all this stuff now. And that was the tool, the mechanism, the ability to be able to do that. There was nothing else that did that. This was all on the back of mitigation easements and conservation easements.
But all that diversification, do you feel you've lost your identity as a ranch?
I've never had someone say that to us. And the reason why I said it is because it's interesting. I mean, we've gotten more attention as a ranching business now than we ever have. I mean, and as an example is, my wife and I were both recognizing it, her separately for her business in conservation and what we're doing at Vleck Ranch as businesswoman and businessman of the year for the Sacramento region. And
something well-deserved, by the way.
Well, again, for Nicole, yes.
For both of you.
I think they felt bad for me. They said, well, I think the wife's going to get it, but the husband will probably pout, so we probably should give it to him too or something. But, because there are a lot more people who are deserving than I was, but that's a different story, different day. That's the first time agriculture had been represented or had been recognized in 90 years by the Sacramento region.
No kidding.
And here's 2 farming families.
Oh, wow.
So, you start looking and going, okay, and then recently, the Sacramento Business Journal just identified the 100 most influential people in the region. Nicole was on that for a lot of good reasons that she deserved. Again, they pulled me into it for whatever reason. I'm on it. But it's what we're doing in agriculture. Mm-hmm. So this is bringing to the forefront with the CEO of Blue Diamond, the CEO of Rayleigh's grocery stores, who again, huge companies. And here we have 2 farming families. So what it's done is it's given us the ability to actually get messages out to the greater population. And again, especially what we're doing foremost, my wife and their business, they do a phenomenal job. They're rice farming, but also they're protecting the environment.
Yeah.
So their identity, it's actually it's put a spotlight on what we do because these easements have given us this ability. And again, I think there's something, whether it's what happened in Yellowstone, when that kind of brought this issue to attention, easements are a vehicle for us being all of us in the cattle industry, for those who choose it, to keep the business going for a long time in the future. But also think about it from the viewpoint from the public, the non-agriculture people. They're hearing that people in our industry are committing forever that they're going to keep that land preserved. There's not too many people who in their non-agricultural lives say, I'm going to commit whatever my business is, and I'm going to commit that forever. Or I'm going to commit my dentistry, my law firm, my factory, whatever it is. And I'm going to commit that's going to do that forever for the benefit of society. That's pretty damn good. So when you take a look at the secondary benefit of easements, those secondary benefits allow us to do an awful lot and allow us to get in agriculture attention when, again, we're only 1% of the population, if that. And especially in California, it's showing that we have the ability to protect the environment and do that. It brings that notoriety in a positive way that people relate to because it's not something that you hear about other people doing. Yeah. It shows the commitment. To me, the touching things that I've ever heard was Paul Harvey when said, God made a farmer.
Right.
When that was played at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I realized it was for an ad, but the ad was about agriculture and a farmer. And you add to that, and we're going to keep this forever, that's who we being not just my family, not Nicole's family, not just us, but that's your family, Michael. That's what people in the cattle industry and in the farming industry, we've chosen to do that, notwithstanding the challenges that we have, the economic challenges in California, the challenges that we have on trade, the challenges that we have with global change, all the things that are happening. Easements fit into that so well because when you listen to the God made a farmer and you see all the commits and things we do, why not saying we're going to do it forever?
2056.
Yes.
The 200th anniversary of the Vleck Ranch.
Yes.
What does that mean to you? And 200 years, that's a long time.
Yes.
And you've kept this operation, your generation, And we just talked about forever.
Yes.
But that's a hell of a milestone. Have you thought about that? And like that's a big anniversary year.
The answer is yes. I thought about it in a terrible way for the 4 years when I thought I was going to lose it, because I was thinking we would never achieve it. And shame on me and all the crap that comes from that. And which makes this even sweeter. And if we can have peace amongst ourselves as family, we're all get along, we all live with each other. And if we're being productive, great. It means a lot to me. And the best that I can do, it's kind of like when you're bowling, the best that I can do is try to have the right form now. And when the ball leaves my hand, I can hope and pray that it hits, but I can't do much after it leaves my hand. Uh-huh. So, I will not have any, I've already told the kids, I will never put a Band-Aid on what they have to do. Just like that bowling ball, once it leaves my hand, it's, if I'm in the ground, I'm in the ground. But I have optimism that each generation's going to get better. I know with our kids, again, they're much better than I am. They're going to do much better than I am. And so I know things are going to be in great shape, and I want to get out of the way and let them do their magic and be there if they need help, but not be there to be a pain in the ass.
What do you think your great-great-grandfather would say today, looking at the ranch?
I think he would appreciate the family aspect of it, because when the family came, we were cows, we were grapes, we were raisins, we were pears. We were just a little farm. I mean, I'd say it in a bad way. I mean, it was whatever it took when we came and homesteaded in Camino. It was whatever grew that they could survive on and they could sell. So, I mean, it really was a family business. So and they had some other businesses that were part of it that were service based and everything else. And I mean, there was, a little hotel in Sacramento that, they provided towels to and stuff and did different things, and then bought the hotel and did different things. And that was in 1850s. So, I mean, it was survival. Mm-hmm. So I think survival hit us again. Because when times are good, we had a lot of good times for a lot of years. It's easy to stay doing what you do because it works. It's comfortable. But when you're up against the ropes and you don't know if in a month from now you will have the ability to pay bills, that's freaking humbling, and it's terrifying. If you don't think diversely, and if you don't think desperately, you're gone. You're out of business. And so, I think it helps. And we get to, it'll be interesting. I do wonder what my father would have thought, because, one thing I didn't share here is that, a lot of these ideas that we are now doing on our operation that we fortunately, and again, a lot of good luck that we've had to make it successful. I posed to my father 6 months before he passed. He passed in an accident, so we obviously didn't know he'd be passing. And we were in a truck, and I was talking about these easements and being able to do mitigation, and with wetlands and vernal pools and shrimp and all, and being able to then take and transition to real estate and bring the monies back and have more diversity, especially in bad cow years. We could expand, and he's hearing my pitch. And again, I'm in a top law firm now, and things are going well, and I think I know what I'm doing, and I'm talking about all these things, and he looks at me, just flat ass dead statement, said, if we did all that stuff in 6 months, we'd be broke. He goes, if you're running this business 6 months, broke, we'd be out of business. And he goes, because if your shadow's not on the land at all times, your shadow is the fertilizer. You're talking about doing all these different things. There's no way you could do the commercial real estate stuff, venture capital. You can't do all these things if your shadow is not on the land, because the land won't grow. If the land doesn't grow, your cattle aren't going to eat. And he said, so if we did what you wanted to do, we'd never make it past 6 months. Guess what? We're 25 years into this. So we made it past 6 months. So that taught me, because I also respect Dad was raised on the ranch. I mean, he was brought home from the hospital. He was adopted, but brought home as a baby. He lived there for 80 years of his life. And that's what he saw his grandmother. I mean, that's what he saw his father and his mother do. That's what he saw his grandfather and his grandmother do. And that's what that's what his great grandfather and his great grandmother did. And they had success at it. And so when you have success, it doesn't foster critical thinking as much. And again, I'm not saying that to everybody, because that's a generalization. But but the very difficult times that we had crafted where we are today and gave us a lot to be thankful for. They were shitty times. They were really, really tough times. And I guess I would go through it again, knowing where we were going to be, but I wouldn't want to experience it again.
You have taken this ranch and made it just enormously successful, as you described today. But it's also so important to the region, to Sacramento County, to the region, the benefits that provides, not just your family, but to the environment, to the critters, to everything in the area. It's just been phenomenal. And the story that you share, I can't thank you enough for spending the time with us today, sharing it. I mean, it's obviously very emotional and deep for you, but it really tells a story that is, I think, resonates more than you think. And we're so grateful to have you as part of the Rangeland Trust family. We're honored and humbled by that. And thank you so much for everything that you do. The awards that you have downplayed, I'm going to say simply bullshit, because you do deserve them. You've earned them. You deserve them, both you and Nicole. And then we're so proud to call you two friends.
Well, grateful for the friendship, and the feeling's absolutely mutual. But again, whether it's Ricardo Madrigal, Jerry Spencer, who are working on the ranch on a daily basis and working their ass off and doing a great job and raising their families there. We love their families. They're like our family. And CRT, who's partnered with us in this process. Without CRT, and without what you guys have helped us with easements, we would not be here. Without Mark Burrell, with Westmark. So again, we stand on a lot of shoulders, and that's not lost on us. And my wife, who has taught me so much about humility and appreciating the environment and how to be a better business person and how to be better in agriculture. And same with her dad, with Al, has been great. And so again, I'm a product of a lot of luck, and I'm a product of a lot of people who have been kind. And I am lucky where I am, and I understand that luck. And I know that that's why I'm here.
Well, it means a lot to us, and thank you so much for all you do.
Yes. I'm grateful for all you do. Thank you for the opportunity. And again, wouldn't be here without CRT and with you, Michael, and the entire team. I appreciate what everybody does. It's a pleasure to work with you. It's a pleasure to work with your team. Your team kicks ass. You've gotten emails from me on that, and it's, from what all aspects of it. These are difficult issues. We're dealing with agencies, whether it's mitigation or whether it's conservation. They're agencies. They have different ways of approaching things. You guys are the middle. The men and women in CRT are the middle people between us and getting those answers done. And you find a way to get it done. And that's not lost on me one bit, because again, we would not have what we have without that success. And that's why financially, why we got behind you folks and have helped do that. And I really recommend to others, if you find a way to donate to CRT, they do a hell of a job. And they don't ask for the donation to their detriment, but that's, again, who they are. And it's incumbent upon those of us who have really benefited from to get that message out and to remind people that this is a volunteer organization, and the paid professionals behind this volunteer organization work their ass off. And simultaneously, they're conserving and preserving agriculture. we all benefit. The same thing that with our family who came over in the covered wagon, you folks are benefiting people who you'll never meet and who will never have the honor to meet you. Yet nonetheless, you work your ass off to make that happen. Thank you.
Wow. I don't know what to say, but we have an amazing team, and we're so glad that you're part of that, that family. Thank you.
Honored and lucky. Thank you.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode with Stan. That closes the gate on another episode of Tune Into the Land. We want to remind you that your feedback matters. So please share your thoughts by leaving a comment or a review. Let us know what you enjoyed, what topics you'd like us to dig into, and your suggestions for future guests. Don't forget to hit that follow button to ensure you're notified when the new episodes drop. And if you'd like to support our mission, visit our website at rangelandtrust.org. There you can make a donation or check out the Get Involved tab to learn more about upcoming events and conservation projects. Thank you for listening, and until next time.